What if I told you that the person you've been pretending to be isn't the person you were meant to become? What if the life you're living right now is just a shadow of what's possible? Most people wander through their entire existence without ever discovering who they truly are. They wear masks, they play roles, they follow scripts written by others. But what if today, right now, you decided to tear off that mask and finally meet yourself? That's not a fantasy. That's a decision. You've spent years constructing an identity built from other people's expectations. You've listened to their voices so long that you can't hear your own anymore. You've been living at half capacity, running on borrowed dreams and recycled ambitions. This isn't a feel-good message. This is a battle cry. This is the moment you declare war on mediocrity, on self-deception, on the comfortable lie that says, "This is just who I am." No, that's who you've settled for being. The truth is, finding yourself isn't some gentle journey of self-discovery. It's an excavation. It's digging through layers of conditioning, peeling back years of programming, and confronting the painful reality that you've been living someone else's life. This isn't about changing who you are. It's about uncovering who you've always been beneath the noise. When you finally meet yourself, your true self, everything changes. Not gradually, not eventually, but instantly, because clarity becomes your new foundation. Most people are waiting for permission to become themselves. They think authenticity is something they need to earn, something they need to qualify for. But let me be clear. You don't need anyone's approval to live in your truth. The version of you that's buried beneath insecurity and doubt isn't waiting for the perfect moment to emerge. It's waiting for you to make a decision. Will you continue living as a reflection of what others expect, or will you finally have the courage to be seen? I'm not talking about finding yourself like it's some esoteric journey. I'm talking about claiming yourself. I'm talking about standing in front of the mirror and seeing past the mask, past the role you play for others, past the comfortable identity you've adopted just to fit in. True power isn't found in conformity. It's found in the moment you decide that the gap between who you are and who you're pretending to be has become too painful to sustain. Your entire life shifts the moment you stop asking, "Who should I be?" and start declaring, "This is who I am." That declaration isn't made with words, it's made with choices. Every time you choose authenticity over approval, every time you speak your truth instead of the convenient lie, every time you honor your instincts instead of following the crowd, that's when finding yourself becomes more than a concept. It becomes your reality, your foundation, your power source. But here's what most people don't understand about finding themselves. It's not about adding anything new. It's about removal. It's about stripping away the layers that aren't you. It's about silencing the voices you've internalized from parents, teachers, partners, society. Those voices served a purpose once. They helped you navigate. They helped you belong. But now they're keeping you small. Now they're the walls of your self-made prison. Finding yourself starts with questioning every should that governs your life. When you realize that most of your beliefs aren't even yours, that they were installed in you before you could even critically examine them, that's the beginning of freedom. Because once you see the programming, you can rewrite it. Once you recognize that your limitations are largely self-imposed, you can remove them. This isn't about rejecting everything from your past. It's about consciously choosing what you carry forward into your future. It's about becoming the architect of your identity rather than its prisoner. Think about it. How many decisions have you made based on who you think you are, rather than who you could become? How many opportunities have you dismissed because they didn't fit your self-image? How many risks have you avoided because you told yourself, "That's not me"? Your identity should be a gateway, not a cage. It should expand your possibilities, not limit them. And the beautiful truth is that at any moment, including right now, you can decide that the old identity no longer serves you. Most people think finding themselves is a process of addition, adding new skills, new knowledge, new experiences. But the most powerful transformations come through subtraction. Remove the need for validation. Remove the fear of judgment. Remove the attachment to outcomes. Remove the limiting beliefs that have defined your boundaries. What remains when all that is stripped away? You. Not the role you play, not the mask you wear, but you in your raw, essential form. That's who you're looking for. There's a difference between knowing who you are and living who you are. Most people get stuck in the knowing phase. They have moments of clarity, glimpses of their authentic self, but they retreat back into familiar patterns because living your truth requires courage. It means making decisions that might disappoint others. It means setting boundaries that might make people uncomfortable. It means pursuing dreams that others might call unrealistic. But that discomfort is the price of authenticity. You must understand this. Finding yourself is not a theoretical exercise. It's not about taking personality tests or reading self-help books. It's about making decisions aligned with your core values, even when those decisions come with consequences. It's about speaking truths that have been buried inside you, even when your voice shakes. It's about claiming space in a world that wants you to shrink. This is a daily practice, not a one-time event. The greatest barrier to finding yourself isn't external, it's internal. It's the fear that who you really are won't be enough. It's the doubt that whispers, who are you to break the mold? Who are you to live differently? Who are you to want more? And those doubts sound reasonable because they're spoken in a familiar voice, your voice. But that voice isn't really yours. It's the collective voice of every limitation you've ever accepted as truth. Recognize it for what it is, the final defense of your comfort zone. When someone truly discovers who they are, they stop explaining themselves to others. They stop seeking consensus for their decisions. They stop diluting their truth to make it more palatable. This isn't arrogance, it's alignment. When you're aligned with your authentic self, you no longer need external validation because you've found something more powerful, internal congruence. The peace that comes from being the same person on the inside as you are on the outside is worth any temporary discomfort. Let me be direct. Most people die without ever finding themselves. They live according to expectations, checking boxes that were placed in front of them by others. They work jobs they tolerate, maintain relationships that are convenient, and pursue goals that look good on paper. They might feel a persistent emptiness, a nagging sense that something's missing, but they push it down. They distract themselves. They call it being realistic. Don't let that be your story. Don't let comfort be the reason you never meet yourself. Finding yourself requires confronting this truth. Parts of your current identity were constructed as armor, developed to protect you from pain. Maybe you became the achiever because it won you validation. Maybe you became the peacekeeper because conflict felt threatening. Maybe you became the helper because it gave you a sense of worth. These roles kept you safe, but safety and authenticity are not the same thing. Sometimes finding yourself means outgrowing the very identity that has defined you. There's a reason why major life disruptions, loss, failure, illness, often precede the most profound self-discoveries. When the external identity crumbles, when the roles you've played are no longer available to you, when your usual distractions are stripped away, you're forced to confront the essential question: who am I beneath all of this? Don't wait for crisis to initiate this inquiry. Don't wait until life breaks down your defenses. Have the courage to ask yourself now, while you still have the freedom to choose your response. The search for authenticity is not a straight line. It's a spiral. You'll revisit the same questions at different phases of your life, but each time from a higher vantage point. Each time with more clarity, more wisdom, more compassion for yourself. What felt true about your identity at 25 will evolve by 35 and again by 50. This isn't inconsistency, it's growth. The authentic self isn't static. It's in constant conversation with your experiences, integrating them, learning from them, expanding because of them. Here's what happens when you finally find yourself. Decisions become simpler. Not easier, but simpler. When you know who you are and what you value, you have a filter for every choice. Does this align with my authentic self or contradict it? Does this expand my sense of possibility or diminish it? Does this reflect my truth or someone else's expectation? Clarity of identity leads to clarity of direction. When you no longer have to consult external sources to know what's right for you, you move with confidence, with purpose. Most people confuse fitting in with belonging. Fitting in is about assessing a situation and becoming who you need to be accepted. Belonging is about finding the places, people, and work that align with who you already are. One requires shape-shifting. The other requires self-honoring. One depletes you, the other energizes you. When you find yourself, your real self, you stop trying to fit in everywhere and start creating space where you naturally belong. That's where your power lives. Pay attention to the moments when you feel most alive, most electric, most present, not comfortable, not safe, but fully engaged with life. Those moments are breadcrumbs leading you back to yourself. Maybe it's when you're creating something new or challenging your limits or connecting deeply with another human being. These aren't random preferences. They're glimpses of your authentic wiring. They reveal what makes you come alive. And that aliveness isn't a luxury. It's a signpost pointing toward your truest self. Finding yourself means recognizing that you're not one-dimensional. You contain multitudes. You can be both analytical and intuitive, both structured and spontaneous, both vulnerable and strong. Embracing these apparent contradictions doesn't make you inconsistent. It makes you human. When you stop forcing yourself into oversimplified categories and allow yourself to be complex, you expand what's possible. You create space for all parts of yourself to exist without inner conflict or shame. That integration is freedom. There's a profound difference between knowing about yourself and knowing yourself. One is intellectual, the other is experiential. You can read every self-help book, take every personality assessment, analyze your patterns intellectually, but until you put yourself in situations that challenge your comfort zone, that force you to respond authentically rather than automatically, you're just collecting data. You're not experiencing revelation. Finding yourself happens in the field, not the classroom. It happens through action, through risk, through engagement with life. The most powerful question you can ask isn't "Who am I?" but "Who am I when no one is watching?" Who are you when there's no social gain, no external reward, no validation on the line? What thoughts occupy your mind in moments of solitude? What activities would you pursue if achievement weren't the goal? Your answers reveal your authentic nature, not the performative identity you've constructed for others. The gap between these two selves is the exact measure of how far you still have to go. Let me offer you an uncomfortable truth. Sometimes finding yourself means losing people who were only compatible with your former self. As you align more deeply with your authentic nature, you'll disrupt the dynamic of relationships built on who you used to be. Some people will resist this evolution. Some will try to pull you back into familiar patterns. Some will project their own fears onto your transformation. This isn't evidence that you're on the wrong path. It's evidence that you're no longer living to fulfill others' expectations. Most people confuse their thoughts with their identity. They believe they are what they think. But your thoughts are largely programmed by culture, by experience, by habit. They cycle through familiar patterns, reinforcing the same self-image day after day. Finding yourself requires creating distance between your awareness and your thoughts. You are not your thoughts. You are the consciousness that observes them. When you realize this, your identity is no longer at the mercy of whatever narrative is running through your mind. There's no greater misalignment than pursuing goals that aren't truly yours. Many people chase accomplishments that look impressive but feel hollow once achieved. They pursue careers that provide status but not fulfillment. They build lifestyles that photograph well but don't feel good to live in. Finding yourself means having the courage to distinguish between inherited ambitions and authentic desires. It means asking, whose definition of success am I chasing? And being honest enough to redirect if the answer isn't your own. The journey to find yourself will trigger resistance, not just from others, but from within. Parts of you will fight to maintain the status quo, even if the status quo is limiting your potential. This inner resistance often disguises itself as practicality, as responsibility, as concern for others. Now isn't the right time, it says. Think about how this will affect everyone else, it warns. Recognize this for what it is: fear of the unknown, fear of disruption, fear of outgrowing the identity you've invested in. Many people mistake external achievements for self-knowledge. They believe that once they reach certain milestones, a degree, a promotion, a relationship, financial stability, then they'll finally know who they are. But external accomplishments don't create inner clarity. They often just create more sophisticated ways to avoid the fundamental question of identity. Finding yourself isn't about adding achievements to your resume. It's about stripping away the belief that achievement defines your worth. It's about discovering what remains when all external validations are removed. True self-discovery requires radical honesty, not just about your strengths, but about your shadows, your contradictions, your weaknesses. It means acknowledging the gap between who you present yourself to be and who you actually are in private moments. It means confronting behaviors that don't align with your values. This level of honesty is uncomfortable because it challenges the polished self-image you've worked so hard to maintain. But authenticity isn't found in perfection. It's found in integration of all aspects of yourself. There's a reason why finding yourself feels like coming home. It's because you're returning to a truth that has always been within you, beneath the layers of adaptation and performance. This doesn't mean you'll suddenly have all the answers or never experience doubt again, but there's a qualitative difference between the uncertainty that comes from self-disconnection and the uncertainty that comes from growth. One feels like confusion, the other feels like exploration. One feels like being lost, the other feels like adventure. Pay attention to your resistance, to the areas of your life where you feel the need to defend your choices or justify your preferences. These points of defensiveness often reveal where you're living according to external standards rather than internal truth. When you're fully aligned with your authentic self, you don't need to explain yourself constantly. You don't need to convince others of your right to be who you are. That defensive energy transforms into creative energy when you stop living for approval. Finding yourself requires distinguishing between your conditioned patterns and your core essence. Your patterns, how you respond to stress, how you seek connection, how you pursue goals, were largely formed before you had conscious choice. They were adaptive strategies that helped you navigate childhood experiences, cultural expectations, early relationships. But they aren't you. The real you is the awareness that can observe these patterns, question them, and ultimately choose differently. That's the difference between being run by your programming and consciously creating your life. Most people look for themselves in comparison to others. They define their identity in contrast. I'm not like them, or in similarity, I'm just like them. But comparison always distorts self-knowledge. When you measure yourself against others, you're not seeing yourself clearly, you're seeing yourself relationally. Finding yourself requires temporary suspension of the comparative mind. It requires asking, who would I be if there was no one to compare myself to? What would I want if there was no status to be gained? Your body holds wisdom about your authentic self that your thinking mind often overrides. Notice what energizes you versus what depletes you. Notice which environments feel expansive and which feel constrictive. Notice whose presence brings a sense of ease and whose presence creates tension. These physical responses aren't random. They're your body's feedback system guiding you toward authenticity and away from misalignment. Finding yourself isn't just an intellectual exercise. It's a full-body experience of coming home to your truth. There's profound freedom in realizing that you don't have to be who you've always been. Your past behaviors, preferences, and beliefs don't have to determine your future unless you decide they will. At any moment you can say, that was the old me. I'm choosing differently now. This isn't inconsistency, it's evolution. It's not betraying yourself, it's expanding what self means. The most empowering aspect of finding yourself is discovering that self isn't fixed. It's fluid, responsive, capable of transformation while still maintaining its essential core. One of the most liberating realizations on the path to finding yourself is this: you don't have to have it all figured out. You don't need perfect self-knowledge before you can begin living authentically. In fact, clarity often comes through action, not contemplation. You discover who you are by making choices, observing your responses, adjusting course, and making new choices. Give yourself permission to be a work in progress. The path to finding yourself isn't about reaching a destination. It's about embracing the ongoing journey of becoming. Most people spend their lives trying to fix or improve themselves, treating their authentic nature as a problem to be solved rather than a reality to be embraced. But finding yourself isn't about becoming some idealized version of who you think you should be. It's about acknowledging who you already are, with all your quirks, sensitivities, limitations, and gifts. Self-improvement that isn't grounded in self-acceptance just creates a more sophisticated form of self-rejection. True growth begins with the radical acceptance of your starting point. There's a voice within you that knows who you are beneath all the layers of adaptation and performance. It's quieter than your fears, subtler than your ambitions, deeper than your insecurities. Finding yourself means learning to distinguish this voice from all the others clamoring for your attention. It means developing a relationship with your intuition so intimate that you recognize its counsel even when it contradicts your logical mind. This inner knowing isn't mystical. It's the accumulated wisdom of your lived experience speaking through your body. The quest to find yourself will disrupt your life, not because authenticity is inherently destructive, but because it's incompatible with the compromises you've been making to maintain the status quo. Relationships built on who you pretend to be cannot survive the emergence of who you actually are. Career paths chosen for security rather than alignment will feel increasingly constraining as your authentic self emerges. This disruption isn't failure, it's necessary recalibration. It's your life reorganizing itself around truth rather than convenience. Finding yourself doesn't happen in isolation. We discover who we are through relationship with others, with nature, with work, with challenges. It's in the friction of these interactions that our true nature reveals itself. Pay attention to what these interactions show you. How do you respond when you're challenged? What emerges when you're deeply seen by another? What parts of yourself do you protect from exposure? What aspects of yourself do you amplify or diminish depending on context? These patterns aren't random, they're revelatory. There's a cost to not knowing yourself, a price paid in unrealized potential, in relationships that never quite connect at the deepest level, in work that utilizes your skills but not your gifts, in a life that looks successful on paper but feels hollow in practice. This isn't about dramatic failure. It's about subtle misalignment. It's the quiet desperation of living adjacent to your authentic path but never quite stepping onto it. The tragedy isn't in making mistakes. It's in never discovering what you were meant to contribute. Most people think finding themselves is about what they do, but it's actually about how they do everything. It's about the unique energy you bring to ordinary moments. It's your particular blend of qualities, your thoughtfulness or spontaneity, your intensity or gentleness, your analytical precision or intuitive grasp, expressed through whatever activity you're engaged in. You don't find yourself in what you accomplish. You find yourself in how you move through the world, regardless of external outcomes or recognition. There's a misconception that finding yourself is a solitary journey, that you must withdraw from the world to discover who you truly are. But often, the opposite is true. You find yourself through meaningful engagement, through contribution, through allowing yourself to be affected by others and to affect them in return. It's in the dynamic exchange between your inner reality and the outer world that your authentic self emerges, not in isolation, but in conscious relationship with all that is beyond you. Finding yourself requires detaching from others' definitions of success. It means recognizing that what constitutes a well-lived life is deeply personal, not universal. Some people thrive in competitive environments. Others come alive through collaboration. Some need variety and novelty. Others need depth and mastery. Some express themselves through bold action. Others through nuanced thought. There's no hierarchy here, just different authentic expressions. The only failure is abandoning your unique path to walk someone else's, even if that path is more celebrated. One of the most difficult aspects of finding yourself is distinguishing between your conditioned responses and your authentic nature. When you find yourself triggered, defensive, or rigidly attached to being right, you're usually operating from conditioning, not authenticity. The authentic self isn't threatened by different perspectives. It doesn't need to prove its worth or defend its territory. It's curious rather than certain, expansive rather than contracted, compassionate rather than judgmental, even toward the parts of yourself still caught in old patterns. There's a profound difference between knowing what you don't want and knowing what you do want. Many people define themselves primarily through rejection, of certain lifestyles, beliefs, or choices. Finding yourself isn't just about what you're pushing against, it's about what you're moving toward. It's about identifying your authentic yes rather than just your reactive no. This requires shifting from defensive identity, who you're not, to generative identity, who you're becoming, from avoiding what doesn't fit to actively creating what does. Finding yourself means recognizing that authenticity isn't one-dimensional. It has ethical, psychological, and practical dimensions that sometimes conflict. Being true to your feelings might occasionally contradict being true to your commitments. Being true to your potential might temporarily require denying some aspect of your current self. These tensions aren't signs of failure, they're the complex reality of human growth. Authenticity isn't about rigid consistency, it's about conscious navigation of these competing truths with integrity and compassion. The most reliable path to finding yourself is through purposeful action, not endless introspection, not constant self-analysis, but engagement with the world in ways that matter to you. When you commit to something larger than yourself, whether that's creative work, service to others, pursuit of mastery, or building meaningful relationships, your authentic nature reveals itself organically. Purpose creates the context for self-discovery. It's the field in which your true strengths, values, and passions become not just theoretical, but lived realities. Pay attention to where you feel most free to express yourself without calculation or self-consciousness. These environments and relationships are showing you something essential about your authentic nature. They reveal the conditions under which your true self naturally emerges, without force, without effort, without the exhausting vigilance of self-monitoring. Finding yourself isn't about becoming something new. It's about creating the conditions where who you already are can fully exist without apology or performance. Finding yourself doesn't happen in epiphanies alone. It happens in small moments of choice. When you speak up, although your voice might shake, when you set a boundary despite the discomfort, when you pursue what calls to you rather than what impresses others. Each of these choices is a declaration. This is who I am. This matters to me. This is my truth. These micro-decisions might seem insignificant in isolation, but collectively they form the foundation of your authentic identity. Most people think self-knowledge comes from analyzing their past, but often your deepest truth is revealed in how you envision your future. What possibilities light you up? What potential contributions give you a sense of meaning? What kind of person do you feel called to become? These forward-looking questions often reveal more about your authentic self than backward-looking analysis because they bypass your conditioned limitations and connect you directly with your core values and aspirations. There's a difference between finding yourself and creating yourself. Finding implies that your authentic self exists fully formed, waiting to be discovered. Creating suggests that you invent your identity from nothing. The truth lies in between. You have inherent qualities, preferences, and capacities, but how you develop and express them is a creative act. You're both finding what's already there and actively shaping it through your choices. You're not just an archaeologist uncovering your true self, you're also an artist bringing it to life. One paradox of finding yourself is that the more specific and differentiated you become, the more universally you can connect. When you embrace your particular combination of traits, your unique sensitivities, perspectives, and gifts, you don't become more isolated. You become more authentically engaged with the world. True individuality doesn't separate you from others. It enables you to contribute something distinct. It's your unique thread in the larger tapestry. The more clearly defined that thread, the more it strengthens the whole. Finding yourself isn't measured by how much you know about yourself, but by how you live that knowledge. It's about closing the gap between your awareness and your actions. You can have tremendous insight into your patterns, your values, and your authentic desires. But if you continue to make choices that contradict this understanding, you remain divided. Integration happens when your outer life becomes a more accurate reflection of your inner truth, not perfectly, but progressively. That alignment is what creates the feeling of wholeness. Most people avoid finding themselves because they fear what they might discover. They worry they'll uncover needs that can't be met, desires that seem selfish, or aspects of themselves that contradict their public image. But authentic self-knowledge isn't meant to trap you in rigid declarations of who you are. It's meant to free you from unconscious patterns that limit who you can become. When you know yourself, you have choices. When you're run by unexamined impulses and beliefs, you remain reactive, defensively protecting an identity you haven't even consciously chosen. There's a significant distinction between traits you can change and traits that represent your authentic wiring. You can develop skills, expand your perspectives, heal emotional wounds, and transform many limiting beliefs. But certain aspects of your nature, your sensitivity or resilience, your need for stimulation or stillness, your orientation toward people or ideas, these represent your unique design. Finding yourself means discerning between what can and should evolve versus what should be honored as the foundations of your authentic self. The most profound shifts in finding yourself often come through letting go of who you thought you were supposed to be. This release isn't achieved through force or discipline. It happens through honest acknowledgement of what isn't working, what no longer feels authentic, what you've outgrown. There's grief in this letting go. Grief for the investments you've made in an identity that no longer fits. Grief for the approval you might lose. Grief for the clarity that disappears before new clarity emerges. Honor this grief. It's part of the transformation. Finding yourself is inherently disruptive because it challenges the stories you've been telling about who you are. These stories aren't just personal. They're reinforced by relationships, roles, and routines that have built up around your old identity. When you begin to embody a more authentic self, you're not just changing your internal narrative, you're changing the dynamics of every system you're part of. This creates resistance both within and around you, not because authenticity is wrong, but because systems naturally resist change. Most people associate finding themselves with grand revelations, but the deepest self-knowledge often comes through ordinary moments of choice. Do you speak up or stay silent? Do you follow convention or trust your instinct? Do you pursue comfort or growth? Each decision is a data point, a piece of evidence revealing who you are beneath your adaptations. Pay attention not just to what you choose, but to how these choices make you feel. Alignment produces a sense of rightness that transcends both comfort and convenience. There's a crucial distinction between your social self and your essential self. Your social self, adaptive, strategic, concerned with belonging, developed to help you navigate relationships and meet external expectations. It's not false, but it's curated. Your essential self, expressive, authentic, guided by intrinsic motivation, emerges when those adaptive layers are no longer necessary. Finding yourself means developing a conscious relationship with both aspects, using discernment about when adaptation serves your deeper values versus when it compromises them. One of the greatest obstacles to finding yourself is the belief that you should already know who you are. This expectation creates pressure that actually blocks authentic self-discovery. It turns a process of exploration into a performance of certainty. Give yourself permission to be uncertain, to experiment, to change your mind as new aspects of yourself are revealed. The path to authenticity isn't a straight line of increasing self-knowledge. It's a spiral of discovery, integration, and renewed questioning as you evolve through different life stages. Finding yourself requires developing a more nuanced relationship with your emotions, not identifying with them completely, I am angry, and not disconnecting from them entirely, I don't feel anything, but relating to them as information about your authentic needs and boundaries. When you can witness your emotional responses without being consumed by them, you gain crucial self-knowledge. Your reactions, especially the intense or recurring ones, are showing you where your deepest values and vulnerabilities lie. They're maps leading back to your authentic self. There's immense power in recognizing that who you are transcends what has happened to you. Your experiences shape you, but they don't define you. Finding yourself means distinguishing between the events of your life and the essence of your being that moves through those events. This doesn't minimize the impact of your experiences, especially difficult ones. It simply acknowledges that something within you remains sovereign, capable of choice, growth, and new possibilities, regardless of external circumstances. That sovereign self is who you're looking for. Most people think finding themselves is about discovering what makes them special or unique, but often it's about recognizing what makes them human. It's about acknowledging your fundamental needs for connection, meaning, and authenticity, needs you share with every other person. The particulars of how you express and fulfill these needs will be distinctive, but the needs themselves are universal. Finding yourself paradoxically requires both embracing your uniqueness and surrendering the illusion of separateness that keeps you isolated in your struggles. Finding yourself isn't just about self-understanding, it's about self-acceptance. Understanding gives you clarity about your patterns, your preferences, your authentic nature. Acceptance gives you the capacity to work with what you discover without judgment or rejection. Without acceptance, increased self-knowledge can actually create more internal division as you identify all the ways you fall short of your own ideals. The most transformative self-discovery combines clear-eyed awareness with genuine compassion for all that you find. There's a significant difference between a life that expresses who you are and a life that impresses others. Many people sacrifice authenticity for the temporary validation that comes from meeting external standards of success or likability. But that validation never satisfies the deeper hunger for authentic self-expression. Finding yourself means getting radically honest about what truly matters to you. Not what you've been taught should matter, not what looks good to others, but what genuinely resonates with your core values and authentic desires. One of the clearest indicators that you're finding yourself is an increasing sense of inner freedom. Not freedom from all constraints, but freedom to respond to life from your authentic center rather than from conditioning or fear. This inner freedom isn't dependent on external circumstances being perfect. It's the ability to remain connected to your truth even amidst challenges. It's the space between stimulus and response where your authentic choice lives. The more developed this space becomes, the more genuinely yourself you can be in any situation. Finding yourself isn't a luxury, it's a necessity for living a life that feels meaningful and aligned. When you operate from a borrowed identity, adopting others' values without questioning them, pursuing paths because they're expected rather than chosen, you create internal division. Part of you goes through the motions while another part withholds full engagement. This division drains your energy and diminishes your impact. Integration comes when your outer actions reflect your inner truth. That alignment is what makes life not just successful, but satisfying. Pay attention to where your mind naturally goes when it's not focused on immediate tasks. What questions captivate you? What possibilities energize you? What injustices anger you? What beauty moves you? These spontaneous responses reveal what matters to your authentic self beneath all the shoulds and social expectations. Finding yourself isn't about forcing interest in what seems impressive or practical. It's about honoring what naturally engages your curiosity, concern, and care, even if those interests don't fit neatly into conventional categories. Most people think finding themselves means reaching some final state of self-knowledge, but authenticity isn't static. It's evolving. Different aspects of your authentic self emerge as you move through different life stages and circumstances. What expressed your truth at 30 might not express it at 50. Finding yourself isn't a one-time achievement. It's an ongoing commitment to remaining curious about who you're becoming, to continually aligning your choices with your evolving understanding of your deepest values and purpose. There's profound power in distinguishing between what you've chosen and what you've accepted by default. Many aspects of your current identity weren't consciously selected. They were absorbed from family dynamics, cultural messaging, early experiences, or practical necessity. Finding yourself requires examining these default settings with honest curiosity. Does this still serve me? Does this reflect my authentic values? Would I choose this today if I were starting fresh? The elements you consciously reaffirm become genuinely yours. The rest are just habits awaiting reconsideration. Finding yourself requires developing a more nuanced relationship with fear, not eliminating it, that's neither possible nor desirable, but distinguishing between fears that protect you from genuine harm and fears that merely protect you from growth, change, or authentic expression. When you can differentiate between fear that serves your safety and fear that maintains your limitations, you gain access to choices that were previously hidden. The most transformative question isn't how do I eliminate fear, but which fears are worth listening to. One of the most liberating aspects of finding yourself is discovering that you don't have to identify with your thoughts. You are not your self-criticism, your recurring worries, your harsh judgments, or your limiting beliefs. These are mental patterns running through your awareness, not the awareness itself. When you create space between your essential self and the thoughts moving through your mind, you gain the freedom to question thoughts that don't serve you and to consciously choose which ones you'll believe and act upon. Finding yourself doesn't happen in isolation from others. It happens through authentic connection. When you allow yourself to be truly seen, vulnerabilities, quirks, aspirations, and all, you learn which parts of yourself emerge naturally and which parts are performative. Genuine relationships create a mirror that reflects your authentic nature back to you. They show you where you're still hiding, where you're still adapting at the expense of authenticity. The quality of your connections directly reflects the quality of your relationship with yourself. Most people mistake self-knowledge for self-improvement. They're constantly trying to fix themselves, upgrade themselves, optimize themselves, treating their authentic nature as inadequate. But finding yourself isn't about becoming better. It's about becoming truer. It's about removing the obstacles to your natural expression rather than adding layers of enhancement. When you stop trying to improve who you are and focus instead on expressing who you are more genuinely, you paradoxically create the conditions for organic growth and development without the internal division of self-rejection. There's profound freedom in realizing that your worth isn't measured by your productivity, your achievements, or your ability to meet external standards. Finding yourself means recognizing that your value is inherent, not earned through performance or diminished by failure. This recognition doesn't make you complacent, it makes you authentic. When you stop trying to prove your worth through what you accomplish, you can engage with life from genuine interest rather than desperate validation seeking. That shift transforms both the quality of your experience and the impact of your contributions. Finding yourself requires questioning the stories that have defined your limitations. Every "I can't" statement, every "I'm not the kind of person who" declaration, every "that's not realistic for someone like me" belief. These narratives weren't written by your authentic self. They were installed by past experiences, cultural messaging, or protective mechanisms. Your essential nature isn't defined by these constraints. It expresses through your unique gifts when you stop believing the stories that tell you who you can't be. One of the most powerful realizations on the path to finding yourself is that your flaws don't diminish your wholeness. They're expressions of it. Your sensitivity, your intensity, your analytical mind, your emotional depth, these qualities create both your greatest strengths and your most consistent challenges. Finding yourself means stopping the exhausting effort to eliminate your perceived weaknesses and starting to work with your authentic nature, channeling your distinctive traits into contribution rather than trying to become someone you're not. The ultimate test of whether you've found yourself isn't how you feel in moments of success and validation, but how you respond to setbacks, criticism, and loss. When your sense of self is built on external achievements or approval, these challenges shake your very foundation. But when you're anchored in authentic self-knowledge, difficulties don't destroy your identity. They reveal it. They show you what remains when everything temporary and conditional is stripped away. Your core values, your intrinsic worth, your essential nature. Most people think finding themselves is about achieving certainty, finally knowing exactly who they are, what they want, and where they're going. But authentic self-knowledge often brings you into deeper relationship with uncertainty and mystery. As you release fixed ideas about your identity, you create space for new aspects of yourself to emerge. You become less rigid, more curious, more responsive to the present moment. This openness isn't confusion. It's freedom from the limitations of who you thought you had to be. There's a crucial distinction between isolation and solitude in the journey to find yourself. Isolation disconnects you from external feedback and perspective, leaving you trapped in your own patterns. Solitude, intentional time alone to reflect, to listen to your inner voice without distraction, connects you more deeply with your authentic nature. Finding yourself requires both meaningful engagement with others and regular communion with your own depths. It's in the dynamic interplay between these two that your most genuine self is revealed and refined. Finding yourself means recognizing that your authentic nature isn't a problem to be solved, but a mystery to be lived. You won't arrive at some final state of complete self-knowledge where all questions are answered and all inner conflicts resolved. The journey is ongoing, evolving as you evolve, revealing new dimensions as you develop the capacity to perceive them. This doesn't mean you're lost or failing. It means you're alive, growing, engaging with the inherent complexity and dynamism of being human. Pay attention to the gap between what energizes you and what depletes you. This isn't just about preferences, it's about alignment. Activities, environments, and relationships that consistently drain your energy are showing you where you're out of sync with your authentic nature. Those that consistently energize you, even when they're challenging, reveal where you're in flow with your essential self. Finding yourself isn't abstract, it's practical. It happens through noticing these patterns and gradually reorganizing your life around what brings you alive. Most people approach finding themselves as if it's a destination, a final state of absolute certainty about who they are. But authenticity isn't static, it's dynamic. It's not about arriving at some fixed identity. It's about developing an ongoing relationship with your evolving self. The questions that matter aren't just, who am I? But who am I becoming? And is this becoming aligned with my deepest values? Finding yourself is less about definition and more about direction, the continuous unfolding of your authentic potential. There's a profound difference between the voice of your conditioning and the voice of your authentic self. The conditioned voice speaks in absolutes. I should, I must, I always, I never. It's rigid, harsh, demanding. Your authentic voice speaks with nuance. I feel drawn to. This resonates with me. I'm curious about. It's flexible, compassionate, exploratory. Finding yourself means learning to distinguish between these voices and gradually shifting your trust from external authority to internal wisdom, not recklessly, but discerningly. The journey to find yourself transforms not just how you see yourself, but how you see others. As you develop compassion for your own contradictions, sensitivities, and growing edges, you naturally extend that compassion outward. As you recognize the complexity of your own motivations, you become less quick to judge others' choices. Finding yourself doesn't lead to self-absorption. It leads to deeper empathy and more genuine connection because you no longer need others to be simpler than they are to feel secure in who you are. One of the clearest signs that you're finding your authentic self is that you stop seeking constant input and validation before making decisions. You develop trust in your own discernment. Not because you think you're infallible, but because you recognize that your perspective has value even when it differs from conventional wisdom. You consult others when appropriate, but you don't outsource your knowing. You've developed an internal reference point that guides your choices from within rather than being pulled in every direction by external opinions. Finding yourself isn't something you do once. It's something you commit to as a lifelong practice. It's the daily choice to remain curious about your own depths rather than settling for comfortable self-definitions. It's the ongoing discipline of aligning your outer life with your inner truth, not perfectly, but progressively. It's the willingness to continue growing, evolving, and revealing new dimensions of who you are for as long as you live. That commitment is what transforms existence from mere survival into genuine self-expression. Life truly begins when you find yourself, not because you've reached some final state of enlightenment, but because you've established an authentic relationship with your own becoming. You've stopped waiting for permission to be who you are. You've stopped postponing your real life until you have more clarity, more certainty, more validation. You've recognized that the journey isn't about arriving at a fixed destination called self-knowledge. It's about bringing your authentic presence to every moment of your unfolding life. That presence is both your greatest gift and your truest legacy. And if this message spoke to the part of you that's ready to live fully awake, subscribe, because this path of becoming is only just beginning.